The dust of forward operating base sentinels settled on everything. A fine, tan powder that coated skin, weapons, and patience with equal disdain. It swirled in the rotor wash of the departing Black Hawk, a gritty farewell to the woman who now stood on the gravel pad, 2 heavy cases at her feet. She wore a sterile uniform, stripped of name, rank, and unit patches, leaving only the faint outlines on the fabric where they once lived. This anonymity was a tool, but here it was being interpreted as a liability. Lieutenant Colonel Vance strode toward her, his own uniform a tapestry of accomplishment. Ranger tab, airborne wings, a combat infantryman badge with a star, a walking testament to a career built on aggressive forward momentum. He stopped a few feet away, his jaw tight, his eyes sweeping over her with an appraisal that was both swift and dismissive. He saw a woman of medium height, with hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to discipline her features into a mask of neutrality. He saw no insignia, no outward sign of authority, and drew his own conclusions. "You're the attachment?" Vance didn't offer a handshake. His voice was a parade ground bark, accustomed to projecting across formations of younger, more impressionable men. "Yes, sir." Her voice was quiet, calm, and carried no inflection he could latch onto. "Right, Sergeant." Rostova, he glanced at the tablet in his hand, mispronouncing her name with a casual carelessness that signaled her insignificance. "Sent down from Bagram to observe and advise on our long-range defensive postures. That about cover it?" "It does, sir." Vance grunted, a sound of profound skepticism. "Look, Sergeant, I run a tight operation here. We are proactive. We don't sit behind HESCO barriers and wait for the enemy to come to us. We take the fight to them. My boys are the best. They don't need an observer, and they certainly don't need advice on marksmanship." He gestured vaguely toward the perimeter. "We have a designated marksman in every squad. They can handle it." The implication was clear. She was a bureaucratic necessity, a box-ticking exercise in gender integration sent from a high command that didn't understand the realities on the ground. She was a problem to be managed, not an asset to be utilized. "I understand, sir," Rostova said, her gaze drifting past him, sweeping across the jagged ridgelines that encircled the valley like broken teeth. Her eyes, a pale, steady gray, were already cataloging fields of fire, identifying dead space, noting the shimmer of heat haze that would distort a shot past 800 meters. Good. Vance seemed pleased by her lack of argument. "Master Sergeant Thorne will get you squared away. He'll find a spot for you." He turned to the hulking NCO who had been standing silently behind him. "Thorne, find Sergeant Rostova a home. Tower 4 is empty. It's got a good view of the western approach. Keep her out of the way. We have a major patrol kicking off at 1,500 inch. With that, the lieutenant colonel pivoted and marched back toward the Tactical Operations Center, a man convinced he had efficiently handled a minor administrative annoyance. Master Sergeant Elias Thorne stepped forward. He was a broad, weathered man, his face a roadmap of desert deployments. Unlike Vance, his eyes lingered on Rostova for a moment, and he saw something different. He saw the way she stood, perfectly balanced, her economy of motion. He saw the way her gaze never stopped moving, constantly assessing, a predator's calm surveillance. And he saw the custom-fitted Pelican cases at her feet, recognizing the dimensions and the reinforced locks. They weren't standard issue. "Ma'am," Thorne said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that held a note of respect Vance's had utterly lacked. He'd learned long ago that the quietest people in a war zone were often the most dangerous. "Master Sergeant," she replied, offering a slight nod. "Tower 4 is this way. It's a bit of a walk." "I don't mind a walk." As they moved through the bustling FOB, the culture Vance had cultivated was on full display. Young rangers, lean and bristling with energy, swaggered past, their conversation loud and laced with bravado. A fresh-faced Lieutenant, Hayes, was briefing his platoon for the afternoon patrol, his voice full of the unshakable confidence that comes from excelling in training but not yet being truly tested by tragedy. He saw Rostova and Thorne approach, his eyes flicking over her anonymous uniform with the same dismissive glance as his commander. He smirked at one of his men, a silent, shared joke at the expense of the unknown woman. Rostova saw it all. She saw the way the junior enlisted mimicked the CO's arrogance. She noticed a private fumbling a magazine change during pre-combat checks, and the squad leader who didn't correct him. She saw the overstaged gear, pouches and holsters arranged for looks rather than for efficient access under fire. It was a unit that looked good on paper and impressive on parade, but there were hairline fractures in its discipline, invisible to a commander focused on patrol metrics and PowerPoint presentations for his superiors. They reached Tower 4, a lonely steel and sandbag perch at the far end of the perimeter. It overlooked a long, winding wadi that snaked its way up from the valley floor, a natural avenue of approach. The scope on that M110 is garbage, and the wind here gets tricky in the afternoon, Thorne said by way of apology. CO likes to keep this sector on low priority. Says the enemy prefers the high ground. Rostova surveyed the terrain. The enemy prefers the path of least resistance, she murmured, more to herself than to him. She looked down at the wadi, then back up at the imposing ridges. They'll use the high ground for observation and fire support, but they'll send their assault element through the low ground, using the creek bed for cover and concealment. Thorne just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. He'd thought the exact same thing 100 times. He had brought it up once, and Vance had dressed him down in front of the entire command staff for defensive thinking. "I'll leave you to it then," Thorne said. "Chow is at 1,800. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." Once alone, Rostova began her ritual. It was a process as ingrained as breathing. She opened the larger of the two cases. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, was her rifle. It was a heavily modified M2010, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. Every component, from the trigger group to the barrel harmonics, was tuned to her exact specifications. It wasn't a weapon. It was an instrument. For the next hour, she worked. She mounted the rifle on a heavy tripod, ensuring it was perfectly level. She attached her optic, a Schmidt and Bender scope with a Horus reticle that looked more like a complex mathematical chart than a simple crosshair. She unpacked a Kestrel weather meter and a small, ruggedized tablet. For another hour, she simply observed. She didn't just look at the terrain. She studied it. She mapped the dead space where the tower's machine gun couldn't reach. She ranged prominent landmarks. A solitary boulder, a gnarled juniper tree, a sharp bend in the wadi, and logged the data into her tablet. She watched the wind, not just its speed and direction, but its personality. She saw how it gusted down the canyon slopes and eddied in the basin, kicking up dust devils that would nudge a bullet off its path. She built a three-dimensional model of the battle space in her mind, a complex tapestry of distance, elevation, and atmospheric variables. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The light changed, and so did the shadows. What had been exposed rock was now cloaked in darkness, and what had been deep shadow was now illuminated by the angled rays. She tracked these changes, understanding that the battlefield was a living entity, constantly shifting. At 1500, she heard the rumble of engines as Lieutenant Hayes's patrol departed. For Mats, bristling with antennas and heavy weapons, rolled out of the gate, heading for the very valley she had been studying. She watched them go, a small, tight knot forming in her stomach. She'd seen this movie before, overconfidence marching into a well-laid trap. From her perch, she could hear the faint crackle of the TOC's external speakers. Vance was directing the operation personally, his voice a confident boom over the net. "Striker 1-1, this is Sentinel 6. Report your progress. I want that village cleared and searched before 1800. The brigade commander is very interested in our operational tempo." The pressure was on metrics, on speed, on appearances. Rostova focused her scope on the high ground overlooking the patrol's route. She swept the ridges methodically, dividing the terrain into sectors. It was a slow, patient process like reading a dense book. And then she saw it. A flicker of light, gone as quickly as it came. Not a reflection from a stray piece of trash. It was the glint of coated glass, the lens of an optic. Someone was watching the patrol. She zoomed in, her fingers making minute adjustments to the parallax knob. The heat shimmer was intense, distorting the image, but she held her breath, letting the rifle settle, waiting for a moment of clarity. There, a figure prone, partially concealed by a rock outcropping. The shape was unmistakable, a spotter with a high-powered scope. And where there was a spotter, there was a sniper. She scanned to the left and found him, a long-barreled rifle set up on a bipod, almost perfectly camouflaged. She continued her sweep. Another position, a heavy machine gun nest, dug in and sandbagged, commanding a perfect enfilade down the main road. Then another, an RPG team, waiting patiently behind a cluster of boulders near the mouth of the wadi. It was a classic L-shaped ambush, textbook in its execution. The patrol was driving straight into the kill zone. She reached for her radio handset. Her thumb hovered over the transmit button. What would she say? "Sir, your patrol is about to be annihilated?" Vance would laugh her off the net. He would accuse her of seeing ghosts, of being a risk-averse observer who didn't understand his aggressive doctrine. He would humiliate her and tell her to stay in her lane. And in the time it took for that argument to happen, Hayes and his men would be dead. She lowered the handset. There was nothing she could do. Not yet. Her job was to observe. So she observed. She marked every enemy position on her tablet, inputting range, elevation, and wind holds. She calculated the firing solutions for each one, her mind a cold, efficient computer. She prepared the battlefield. The first explosion echoed through the valley, a deep, resonant crump that was felt as much as heard. It was followed instantly by the furious, overlapping chatter of machine guns and the sharp crack of rifle fire. The radio erupted in a cacophony of panicked voices. "Contact! Contact! RPG hit the lead Vic. We're taking heavy fire from the East Ridge. Striker 1-1 is disabled. We have casualties. Where is it coming from? I can't see them. Everywhere. It's coming from everywhere." In the TOC, Vance's voice, once so confident, was now strained, high-pitched. "Striker, give me a sit rep. What are your casualties? Where is the enemy?" "Sir, we're pinned down. They're dug in on the ridges. We can't move. We have 2 Kias, 3 wounded, 1 critical." Another voice cut in. This one colder, more professional, but laced with an urgent desperation. "Sentinel 6, this is Trident Actual. We are co-located with Striker Platoon and are also pinned. We are taking effective sniper and heavy machine gun fire. We need air support now." A SEAL element. Rostova hadn't known they were with the patrol. That raised the stakes exponentially. "Air is 20 minutes out." Vance yelled back, his voice cracking under the strain. "Pop smoke and lay down suppressive fire." "We can't suppress them, sir. They're in fortified positions. They're walking mortars in on us. We need help now." The SEAL's voice was fraying at the edges. "We are being systematically dismantled down here." Rostova watched through her scope. She saw the muzzle flashes, the streams of tracers pouring into the trapped convoy. She saw puffs of dust kicking up around the American positions as rounds impacted inches from their heads. She saw a medic desperately trying to work on a wounded soldier behind the inadequate cover of a disabled truck's engine block. They were being executed. 20 minutes was an eternity. They had maybe 5. She took a slow, deep breath, held it, and let it out. Her heart rate, which had spiked with the first explosion, settled into a steady, rhythmic beat. The chaos on the radio, the panic in the valley, the impending disaster. It all faded into the background. There was only the rifle, the scope, and the problem. She keyed her radio, switching to the command frequency. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion, cutting through the panic chatter like a surgeon's scalpel. "TOC, this is Watchtower 4. I have positive identification on 5 enemy positions. Request permission to engage." There was a moment of stunned silence on the net. Then Vance's furious voice. "Who the hell is this? Stay off this net. We are in a troops in contact situation. Master Sergeant Thorne's voice cut in immediately, firm and clear. Sir, that's Sergeant Rostova in Tower 4. She has eyes on the ambush site. Let her shoot. I don't have time for this, Master Sergeant. Vance snapped. He was looking at a map, trying to coordinate a relief effort that didn't exist, a man drowning in a crisis of his own making. The plea from the SEALs echoed in his ears. He was losing control. Sir, let her shoot, Thorne repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. A frustrated, guttural sound came from Vance. Fine. Whatever. Engage at will. He dismissed her again, even in the middle of a catastrophe, turning his attention back to the unavailable jets. It wasn't permission. It was an abdication. Rostova didn't need anything more. She had already selected her first target, the heavy machine gun on the eastern ridge. It was the greatest threat, pinning down the bulk of the patrol. The range was 1,150 meters. The wind was gusting from right to left at 10 miles per hour. She dialed 92 mils of elevation and held 18 mils for windage. Her world narrowed to the circular image in her scope. She saw the gunner, a man in a black shalwar camise, feeding a belt of ammunition into his weapon. She placed the reticle on his chest. She took a breath, let half of it out, and felt the natural respiratory pause. The world went still. She pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, a familiar, solid shove. She didn't hear the boom. She was inside the sound. Her focus was entirely downrange, watching the vapor trail of the bullet bend on the wind. It was a long flight, almost 2 seconds. She saw the round arrive before she heard the impact. The gunner's body jerked violently and was thrown backward from the weapon. The stream of tracers pouring from his position ceased instantly. Without pausing, she worked the bolt, ejecting the spent casing, chambering a new round. Her eyes were already scanning for the next target. The RPG team, 980 meters, south slope. They were preparing to fire another rocket at the trapped vehicles. TOC Watchtower 4. Enemy machine gun. East Ridge. Down. Her voice was a monotone, a simple statement of fact. On the radio, there was a brief, hopeful exclamation from one of the pinned-down soldiers. Hey, that MG is down. The one on the ridge is down. Rostova ignored it. She found the RPG gunner in her scope. He was kneeling, the launcher on his shoulder. The shot was easier. Less wind to worry about. Breath. Pause. Press. The rifle cracked again. The RPG gunner collapsed, the unfired rocket tumbling harmlessly to the ground. His assistant, stunned, looked around in confusion, trying to locate the source of the shot. Rostova worked the bolt again, shifted her aim 3 feet to the left, and sent a third round. The assistant fell. Enemy RPG team, south slope, down, she reported. Her voice as calm as if she were reading a grocery list. Now the enemy sniper. This was the hardest target. He was well concealed, over 1,300 meters away on the high ground. He was a professional. He hadn't fired since the initial volley, knowing the muzzle flash would give him away. He was waiting, patient. But his spotter was not as disciplined. Rostova scanned the rock outcropping again and saw the faint glint as the spotter swept the valley, looking for a high-value target. That was the mistake she had been waiting for. She couldn't see the sniper, but she knew he would be within a few meters of his spotter. She aimed for the glint of the optic itself. A difficult, almost impossible shot with the wind and the distance. She held her breath, waiting for the wind to steady. She saw the telltale shimmer of mirage flowing straight up, indicating a momentary lull. Now, she fired. The recoil was a punctuation mark to a complex sentence of calculation. She watched the bullet's trace, a faint ripple in the air. The glint of the enemy scope vanished. A moment later, a figure rose up from behind the rocks. The sniper trying to see what had happened to his partner. He was exposed for less than 2 seconds. It was more than enough time. Her fifth shot was already on its way. It took him high in the chest, spinning him around before he crumpled out of sight. Enemy sniper team, high ground north, neutralized, she stated. In the valley, the change was dramatic. The oppressive, accurate fire that had pinned the Americans down had been systematically removed. The volume of incoming rounds dropped by 90%. The remaining enemy fighters, mostly conscripts with AK-47s, were now firing wildly, their morale shattered by the sudden, invisible lethality that was picking them apart from an unknown location. "Stryker, pull back to the west," Lieutenant Hayes's voice shouted over the radio, finally able to maneuver his men. The SEAL team leader came on the net, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Sentinel-6, be advised, the primary threats have been eliminated. Who the hell is making these shots? Air Asset Angel 1, is that you on station early?" In the TOC, the comms tech, a young specialist, stared at his screen, which displayed the origin point of friendly radio transmissions. He keyed his mic negative Trident Actual. "All shots are originating from the FOB perimeter. From callsign Kestrel, broadcasting from Watchtower 4-inch. A new wave of silence descended on the command net. Kestrel. The name meant nothing to most of them, just a random callsign. But in certain circles, it was a name spoken with a kind of reverence. Inside the TOC, Master Sergeant Thorne turned to look at Vance. The lieutenant colonel's face was ashen, his mouth slightly agape. He was staring at the comms console as if it had spoken in an alien language. "Kestrel," Vance whispered, the name unfamiliar to him. Thorne's expression was grim. "Sir," he said, his voice low but carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Kestrel is the standing call sign for the first-place winner of the JSOC International Sniper Competition." He let that sink in. "For the last 3 years running, they say Kestrel is a ghost, an instructor at the highest level, a legend." Vance's eyes darted from Thorne to the personnel roster on his monitor. He fumbled with the mouse, his hands shaking slightly. He found her name, SFC Eva Rostova, and clicked on it. Most of her file was redacted, classified above his security clearance. But Thorne stepped up behind him and typed a 7-digit override code into the keyboard. The screen flickered, and the redactions vanished. Vance's eyes widened in horror and disbelief. He wasn't looking at the file of a simple sergeant first class. He was looking at a service record that was almost mythical. Distinguished Service Cross, multiple silver stars, a list of special assignments that read like a directory of every major global hotspot for the past 15 years. Her current assignment was listed clearly: Technical Inspector, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, conducting clandestine readiness evaluations of forward deployed units. She wasn't just an observer. She was a test, and he had failed spectacularly. "Watchtower 4, this is TOC. Rostova's voice came over the radio, crisp and professional. "I have identified 2 more enemy positions attempting to withdraw to the northeast. Do I have permission to prosecute?" Vance stared at the speaker, speechless. Thorne reached past him and keyed the mic. "Kestrel, this is Sentinel-7, he said, using his own call sign. "You are cleared hot. Prosecute at your discretion." 2 more sharp cracks echoed from the valley, separated by 10 seconds. "Targets eliminated," Rostova reported. "The valley is clear." The aftermath was quiet, subdued. The medevac helicopter landed, its rotors kicking up a storm of dust that seemed to mock the stillness of the fallen. The patrol limped back to the FOB, their vehicles scarred by shrapnel, their faces smudged with dirt and etched with the trauma of the last hour. They had lost 2 men, but everyone knew it should have been the whole platoon. As the Rangers dismounted, their earlier swagger was gone, replaced by the heavy, shuffling gait of survivors. Lieutenant Hayes, his face pale under a layer of grime, looked up toward the perimeter. His eyes found Tower 4, a solitary silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. He started walking toward it, his men parting to let him pass. He stopped at the base of the tower, looked up, and simply nodded. There were no words that could convey the depth of his shame or his gratitude. The nod was enough. A few minutes later, another group approached. The SEALs. They moved with a lethal grace that even exhaustion couldn't erase. Their leader, a broad-shouldered chief petty officer with a thick beard and eyes that had seen too much, stopped beside Hayes. He removed his helmet, revealing a sweat-matted hairline, and looked up at the tower. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice rough but respectful. Rostova appeared at the railing, her face impassive. "Chief Petty Officer Davis," he said, by way of introduction. "My team and I, we owe you our lives. I've never seen shooting like that, ever. Thank you." He placed his helmet over his heart in a gesture of profound respect. The other SEALs followed suit. They stood there for a long moment in the fading light, a silent tribute from the most elite warriors on the planet to the quiet professional who had saved them. Rostova just gave a single, sharp nod in return, then retreated back into the shadows of the tower. Her part was done. Vance was nowhere to be seen. He had barricaded himself in his office, the door shut, the blinds drawn. His career, once a shining pillar of aggressive command, had crumbled to dust in the space of 20 minutes. He had been weighed, measured, and found wanting, not by a review board or a superior officer, but by the quiet competence of a woman he had dismissed as irrelevant. Later that night, Master Sergeant Thorne climbed the ladder to Tower 4. He carried 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Rostova was sitting on a crate, her rifle disassembled on a cleaning mat before her. Each piece was laid out in perfect order, gleaming under the faint glow of a single red lens headlamp. He handed her a mug. "Figured you could use this," he said. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." She took it, her fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic. They sat in silence for a while, sipping the hot, bitter liquid. The sounds of the FOB were different now. The loud boasts and laughter were gone, replaced by a more somber, purposeful hum. The lesson had been a brutal one, but it had been learned. "Heard the report from the debrief," Thorne said finally, staring out at the dark ridges. 17 enemy Kias confirmed. All single-shot kills. The intel guys are losing their minds. They think a whole platoon of our snipers was out there. Rostova didn't respond. She just picked up the bolt of her rifle and began wiping it down with an oil-soaked cloth, her movements precise and economical. "You're not here just to observe, are you, ma'am?" Thorne asked quietly. It wasn't really a question. She paused her work, her gaze fixed on the piece of steel in her hands. "My job is to make sure our soldiers have the leadership and the support they need to come home," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sometimes that means writing a report. Sometimes it means taking a shot." Thorne nodded, understanding everything she wasn't saying. He understood the weight of her anonymity, the burden of her skill, and the isolation that came with being the one person in the room who saw the whole picture. "Well," he said, finishing his coffee and standing up, "for what it's worth, it's an honor to serve with you, Sergeant Rostova. The honor is mine, Master Sergeant." He left her then, alone with her rifle and the vast, silent darkness. She finished cleaning the weapon, each piece inspected, lubricated, and reassembled with the loving care of a master craftsman. When it was whole again, she did not put it away. She mounted it back on the tripod, pointing it toward the valley. She settled in behind the scope, her eye taking in the familiar, circular world of glass and light. The stars were brilliant in the cold, clear air, and under their ancient light, the mountains kept their secrets. She wasn't a legend. She wasn't a ghost. She was a soldier, a guardian, a quiet professional standing her post. And she would stay there watching until the sun came up.